Okay, welcome everybody to the show and tell meeting of the second EESSI hackathon. So we'll briefly go over the activities of this week and see what happened this week, what got done, what we learned, and what we can still do going forward. So this is the high-level agenda. We'll just walk through each of the tasks and also ask around for general feedback if people have any, and look at the amount of credits we spent in AWS and Azure. So to kick that off, is there any general feedback on the idea of the hackathon? So how did it work out? Did things happen like you expected or hoped to? Things like this. So if anyone wants to speak up, please feel free to do so.
I think to go ahead.
Okay, now in general, I think it was very positive. I was able to work for this hackathon for a couple of hours and got good feedback via Slack. And the only thing was a bit confusing was where are the links and where is the documentation where I need to put in my notes or my, let's say, presentation. And we figured it out. So yeah, I got good help from you and others with the setting up and the pointers. So that was positive.
And any negatives too, or well, other than the let's say the link jungle? But...
no, not really.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have an idea of how much time you spent this week? You say a couple of hours. Is it like 5, 6, something like that?
No, I think it's slightly more than a day. I think day and a half.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
My impression this time around was that people had less time, and so I think we managed to get more done before, certainly on my side anyway. And the other thing was the resources that we had, they weren't heavily used, so maybe the cluster and the cloud stuff was, but we had 3 clusters in Magic Castle, and there were only a couple of people requested the council. Maybe that's not a big deal, right? Just to mention that there was very little usage, I think, on those systems.
Yeah, for the cluster in the cloud, I saw some activity. I usually saw a couple.
Kenneth? Waking up, Kenneth? We don't hear you.
Jörg, you had something too?
Yes, I wanted to apologize. I tried to set time aside in a busy schedule, but unfortunately I had things I really had to attend. So unfortunately, I didn't have any time to do anything. And I'm feeling really guilty here because at the end of the day, I was simply too knackered to do anything. So yeah, that probably could explain why Cluster in the Cloud wasn't used so much. What I said before is in February, when I'm between jobs, I can look and I want to look into that subject we were working on again, and hopefully I can make some contribution here. It was just bad timing for me because we are currently in the middle of rolling out our new cluster and I simply didn't have the time. Before Christmas, it was much easier, but now it was just bad timing for me, and I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, I don't think there's a need to be sorry. There's lots of people who I think maybe underestimated their schedule for this week. Some people also got sick, which of course doesn't help. So that messes things up really good. But I think a factor also was that last time we did it the week before Christmas, and that's typically when people already start to tone down their work or certainly not start new things or work on any big things. So I guess people were filling the gaps that week with the EESSI hackathon. And that's maybe why we saw more activity last time than we did this time. I'm not sure what that tells us. Does that tell us we should only plan a hackathon close to typical holidays to get activity, or I don't know what, but yeah, that's certainly a factor, I think.
I think that is one of the big problems we all have with the virtual meetings, because you're always tempted. Oh, I just do something else on the side, and then you get sucked into that particular direction. Whereas when you are physically in a room with people, it's more difficult to happen. So that could be one possible explanation for it.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Yeah, and that's just the way it is, I guess. Unless we really require that people block time or something, which is not going to happen anyway. I don't see how we can work around this. Okay, any other feedback?
Yeah, this is Hugo Meiland. A couple of things. I would say don't worry too much about NS2. I mean, this is the second time for the hackathon. Let's at least try it a couple of times and see sort of like from that if there's any strong changes that need to be done. From my point of view, also I had very high aspirations, sort of like getting into this. I got thrown into a commercial workshop by some colleagues, so that had to take precedence. And doing less as expected. That being said, I am still planning next week to do some of the work I proposed to do for the hackathon anyway. So from that point of view, it's not a lost cause. But yeah, things happen. Work gets in the way.
Yeah, and if people want to bleed out into next week, I think we can actually leave some or maybe all of the virtual clusters we have set up. We can just let them sit there and let people play around with them if they're up for that. Certainly the ones in
I wouldn't mind. Oh, you're breaking up again, Kenneth.
AWS. Sorry.
You're dropping in and out, Kenneth. One last remark from my side, just having made, and that is these kind of hackathons in this community work as a great accelerator for me to sort of like trigger work on this and getting things moving forward. So in general, doing something like this 2, 3 times, 4 times a year, I think would be a great starter to do this in a more regular cadence and keep things moving forward. I think from seeing the results quite aggressively, which is a really good thing.
I perfectly agree. Personally, I took quite a lot from the last hackathon. It is also benefiting my work, so I can very easily justify it. I'm planning, if possible, to go for more hackathons. If possible, is simply time restriction and whatever life is throwing at me here. But I found it a very good exercise, both personally and in my professional life. So I think if we've got, say, 3 or 4 hackathons in a year, that would move the whole project forward quite significantly.
Yeah, I think I agree. It really helps. It shouldn't be a monthly thing. I think that's clear, because that would require way too much time from too many people. Even though the format in general works quite well, I think. But yeah, planning something 3, 4 times a year and maybe planning it smart, close to vacations, or I don't know if that would help. Yeah, we'll see. So maybe another hackathon in spring, something like that could make sense.
I was wondering, does it make any sense to have a hackathon in, say, summertime, whenever that might be, and assuming that we can travel a little bit more free, to do that as a physical event? Would that also help to build the community?
I would say as soon as we can have physical events, we should probably try to plan one, but then also have a clear virtual component in it to let people who cannot travel or who don't want to travel, so they can at least follow presentations and things like this remotely, or even maybe remotely join in a hackathon as well, although we know that would be difficult. Right now, I don't think there's a point in planning anything at all, since it's very unclear whether it could actually happen or not.
yes, I think for the closer future, most physical events always will have a virtual component in it for exactly the reasons you said.
We could probably already think about pursuing ways to help fund that kind of thing, because there are some costs involved, right? And also potentially being able to fund travel for some people, if some people in the community don't have the funds to travel, that we could try and support that. Yeah, we could ask some commercial people maybe for some sponsorship for that kind of event, or we could also consider something like a cost action. I don't know if they're still on the table, but there's a lot of research centers and stuff involved here, so it could make sense to make a cost proposal which would fund meetings like that. That's what a cost action is for.
Is this a question for Hugo specifically, or?
No, it's not a question. It's more a statement, that if we were going to do in-person stuff, we'd probably want some funding source to help support us.
And I will react anyhow. I'll be happy to sort of like also see internally what's possible. I'm not making any promises, but I do promise to help there and see what can be done.
Cool, that'd be great.
Yeah, we're switching screen share here because I'll have to kill my VPN connection. That's why I'm lagging a bit. Yeah, I would say, unless there's more feedback, maybe Thomas, jump to the next slide. I'll try to cover this. If I'm breaking up again, let me know. So this is just a high-level overview of the credits we spent in AWS.
Maybe we lost Kenneth again.
Yes, it looks like it. I can't hear him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's either very, very intently working on something or he's frozen.
Mm.
Maybe we need to preserve bandwidth by disabling a camera or so.
Yeah.
Let's try that.
But to me, it looks similar, the spending, I would say. Maybe not identical, but similar.
Yeah, I think for the AWS stuff, I mean, maybe it's the GPU nodes. What are they? G4DNs. They look, I don't know. It's hard to, the scales are different, so it's a bit hard to tell whether it's more or less. I think we had 2 the last time. I only have 1 this time, so that would make a difference, right? That probably might account for it.
Okay, should we maybe go to the next slide? Okay, what do we have here? Okay, so that's for Azure.
So here we had 4 nodes that have the InfiniBand, so they're a bit beefy, and that's where all this cost has come from. I could have tried to get these on spot, but on spot pricing, but I didn't. I just didn't bother for this week, but I might do that next time.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the second part, the build node for Zen 3, that was actually done mostly before the hackathon week, but since that's a big chunk in here as well, we mentioned that. Yeah, all of this, both AWS and Azure, is really a non-issue since this is all sponsored credit, so no big problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can move on to the first real task. So this was one I was, let's say, leading, even though I have to admit I didn't get a whole lot of stuff done myself this week. It was mostly Martin, Frank, and Jakob. So maybe Martin can cover this first part.
So I think most of us, we were working on basically the issue I've opened in the last hackathon. Okay, so Frank did something else, but he will show this in the next slide, I think. And the idea was here to basically pick up on all of the open to-do items to end up with a clean support from the easy build side to prepare RPath wrappers when you load, for example, the GCC core module, and to have some kind of flag there to automatically load it. And like everyone, apparently, I didn't have much time this week, so a lot of random stuff appeared. And but this morning I managed to at least get started on writing or rewriting the prepare RPath wrappers function. This is a function that already exists in the toolchains.py from the EasyBuild framework. And this is basically the function that creates the RPath wrappers and puts them in a certain place. And here I've added a couple of parameters to the function. So previously you only could basically specify paths that you want to filter out or include in the RPaths. But on top of that, I need a little bit of steering functionality from the module side. So in here, one new parameter would be the new wrapper dir, which is basically a specified location where the wrapper scripts should be placed at. Otherwise, they would just appear in the temp directory, which is created locally. And it was a bit of a hurdle to locate where they are exactly, how the temp directory is called. And this way, I just basically say, okay, put the wrappers in a certain place. And similarly, there's a parameter to place all RPath wrappers in a single subdirectory. Otherwise, you would get one subdirectory per wrapper type. So one for LD, one for GXX, and so on. And we don't really need this. We just need all of them in one directory. And the last thing is that the RPath wrappers sometimes want to output debug information in a certain log path, which is hard-coded in the bash script. So this might need to change in the future. But in this prepare RPath wrappers function, the bash script or the location of this log is basically specified. So whenever EasyBuild is run in debug mode, it will try to create a log file in a certain directory, which is weird if you want to load the module on a generic location in your cluster, for example. So this is why I wanted to pass also a disable flag to not do that. And I've chosen all the defaults for all these parameters to just represent the current behavior of this function, so it shouldn't change anything. And we can discuss how clean everything is in the pull request I still have to open, hopefully next week. And yeah, the second thing is basically then another wrapper function, which gets a tool chain, creates a tool chain, and from this tool chain prepares the RPath wrappers for this tool chain. So this tool chain could be, for example, your GCC core or something. And this is just some helper infrastructure to get started. Yeah, then the second thing is at the very bottom, we were also interested, maybe it's enough to just provide the wrappers for LD scripts or LD binaries, because in the end, we only care about linking and we don't really need the wrapper scripts for G++ or GCC, for example. But this is something we have to look into, but for a simple example, it seems to be enough to just have wrappers for LD in place. That's everything from my side.
Yeah,
I guess that'd be true for
I
guess that'd be true for FOSS, but if you were looking at another compiler on top of GCC core, it might be different behavior, right? So if we eventually included Clang toolchain, which also might include their own linker, right? And we'd have to somehow deal with that as well.
Yeah, yeah. And there's actually other linkers we're also looking at next to LD. There's well, LD Gold, but I guess that's in the same category. There's also another one called Mold, which is pretty new, but which is apparently a lot better, a lot faster, and which is getting official support in GCC as well. So this situation may become a bit more complex going forward.
Yeah, and also in Easy, this was all on the EasyBuild side, and in Easy itself, we of course ship the LD with the compatibility layer, and there it is then another story again. So that we cannot really only ship LD, I think. At least we have to think about it.
I think for GCC, eventually GCC will always call LD to do the actual linking. So that's why it works if you only wrap LD. So whether whether GCC comes from the compat layer or the software layer, that doesn't really matter too much. I think as long as you catch the LD that it's calling and you wrap that, it should be okay. But for when you're using Clang or using a different link, or that would complicate things. For the logging part of the wrapper, hard disabling it is one way of doing it, and that's certainly good enough, I think, at first. But maybe we should also make the wrapper a bit smarter, so it only logs when it's being called by EasyBuild, for example. So by checking some environment variable, or that you can also opt into letting it log. So if you're using the wrappers outside of EasyBuild and you're seeing strange behavior, that you can tell the wrapper, please log what you're doing, so we can figure out what's going wrong. But yeah, having it disabled by default certainly makes sense.
Do you have an idea where you should put this log? Should it be alongside the wrapper, or?
Well, it'll have to be in a writable directory, so in /temp somewhere. But what you could do in the RPod wrapper is say, if you're telling me where to log, I will log. If you're not telling me, it's just I'm not logging at all, or it goes to dev null or whatever.
Yeah,
so
right now it just goes to dev null.
Yeah, you could do the enabling and specifying where to log in one go by just specifying a location, and that's enough to enable it. So something like this in the long run may make sense. And maybe it's also, maybe that should also be the behavior in EasyBuild by default, because I think this logging adds some overhead as well. And we actually very rarely look at it, only when we really want to debug the wrapper, which seems to be working well. So maybe we want to disable it by default in EasyBuild anyway, and only enable it when people are opting into it. Okay, I think Jakob, you also did some work in regarding one of these bullet points. Did you make any progress on that?
Yes, indeed, the latter. Which I guess there was some miscommunication about who was taking that, but it's no matter. I essentially integrated the create RPath wrappers method from the EasyBlocks repository. And so, yeah, it does as is described there. I have not created a pull request for that either, but it looks to be working, so I'll make that and someone can take a look.
Yeah, if you have that sitting in a branch somewhere, maybe share that in Slack or something, so Martin can take a look, or the other way around.
Yeah,
and see if you're using a different approach, or if there's aspects that you could steal from each other, and then make it one pull request, I guess.
Okay.
So if you're actively looking into this, maybe Martin can show you what he did, and you can follow up on it.
Yep.
Just to spread the load a bit. I guess it makes sense.
Sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, it's very good to hear that you were able to find your way in EasyBuild framework. That's actually a good result by itself. So that I certainly understand that takes a bit of time, and all this RPod wrapping magic is certainly not very trivial to get into. It has lots of moving parts left and right, but if you were sort of able to work on this and have something that works, that's very good.
Yeah, I think I made my way up the learning curve. So
yeah, that's also that's part of the reason why we're doing a hackathon, right? To really try and push people to out of their comfort zone and look into something they otherwise wouldn't be looking into because they don't really know how to start or something. So yeah, I think that's a good result.
Indeed.
Okay, and then the next slide is Frank had quite a bit of activity as well.
Yes. So since this is my first hackathon and also my first real contact with EZ, I was like, maybe I could do something constructive by building packages on the bare AC layer, which is also what many of our users are doing at the current HPC clusters at the TU. We basically provide them with a module library, a module directory, and pointing and building them, building software for them and saying, well, here are the modules, good luck. So I approached it with that in mind. And as an example showcase, I did build lamps, basically a competitor to Chromax, and it has a few dependencies which should be resolved quite easily. It has CMake, and so yeah, I started compiling, and of course I immediately ran into problems, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. What I initially didn't know is after the sourcing of the AC layer, I also require a development module, which I didn't know because the compatibility layer is also providing some tools for that. So I happily built it with those, and it seems to be working. But so Kenneth said, technically you should build with the development tools of the software layer. So that's something which we need to document if people are going to use this without EasyBuild. And another thing is the configuration and building process of the application itself. If that is already trying to do something with RPath, it really depends on if a binary will work or not. Because if everything is set correctly in the CMake file and it does its own RPath, then we wouldn't be needing these wrapper scripts. But fortunately, LAMP doesn't do that. So if you go to the next slide. And so I got problems with one library from the software layer of AC. And funnily enough, that's the only one that didn't work. OpenMPI worked, and the Eigen module also worked fine, and FFmpeg, but this one didn't. So it basically is a bug in the CMake list file. So Kenneth was able to provide for me a GCC core with wrappers inside, and I used that. And I got success in building lamps, and which I was very happy about. So that run path script works nicely. Also, basically out of context of EasyBuild. So that's for me, that's a keeper. And I did some calculations on the cluster, 4 nodes, 16 cores, and it seems to run in about half an hour. I think it was on the Skylake, say the flavor, and
yeah, this is without any fast network as well. So
exactly, just TCP. And I also promised to do some configure, make install. I'm actually working on a package called getfem, which has a BLAS dependency and is a configure, make install, and also has a libtool script, which builds a Python library. So I'm in the process of compiling that and making some extra notes for the pages, so we can have a second example different from CMake as well. And yeah, that's my current, let's say, evaluation of how this works. And I'm happy to say that if one fixes the RPath problem for specific binaries and libraries, then I think that the EC layer is working as expected and performing nicely.
Yeah, that's a very good result. Yeah, the RPath issues were anticipated, right? We were
Indeed.
working on this already. We don't have that in place yet. We want to have the clean framework implementation all set up first before we modify the modules in the central easy repository. But yeah, it's clear that that's going to be a big help for people who want to build stuff manually.
I also read the notes on the hackathon, and you mentioned probably, or you or somebody else mentioned that Compute Canada is actually using a script which does the read elf, patch elf themselves. Do we have access to that script?
Yeah, this is sitting in one of their GitHub repositories. We can hunt this down. see where it is. Now, I'm not sure how easy it is to start using that script outside of the Compute Canada setup. I would expect it has lots of things hard coded and maybe not that easy to modify.
I did use it actually.
Okay.
I used it one time. It's not. Yeah, it's pretty open because it sits in the compat layer, so it's not that difficult to use. I would say
it's close enough to what we do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the approach is slightly different compared to them. I'm not sure if one is really clearly better than the other. Yeah,
it depends, of course, but because most of the R path will be, let's say, set by LD anyway. But the funny thing is, it doesn't fix stuff which are not done correctly in the make files or the CMake lists themselves. And if those install scripts are basically copy scripts, then and it doesn't do anything of RPath, yeah, then you have a problem because for the getFem, I actually had to put a LD library path for its own library in the Python module. So I was like, yeah, those things basically are not being taken care of, because if LD isn't called, then the path will not be set, and then you still have to, let's say, look at the package, test it, and see if you have to modify it manually.
Yeah, there's certainly going to be if you use anything pre-built. So I'm not sure how you were installing those Python bindings. Was it something pre-built that you just pip installed, or
no? It builds its own Python libraries, shared object, and which links to its libgetfem.so object, which also getting built. So I was wondering, it does the RPath to libopenBLAS in the software layer automatically. That worked fine, but the link to the libgetfem was not done. And
okay,
I'm not sure why. Maybe some libtool oddity or so, but I'll have a look. I'm working on it right now. So.
This could be a gap in the RPath wrappers that we're not doing something correct. I would be a bit surprised if we haven't seen anything like this before, because there's easy build sites that use RPath linking all the time, which doesn't mean there's no corner case that we can have missed. That some people do weird stuff that nobody else does, so it's certainly possible. So
I'll include it in the GitHub anyway, so people can have a look.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what's going on there, and that's where that debugging that's being done by the RPath wrappers could come in handy. Where you can trace it down for this particular library. What is it actually doing, or why is it not doing something? Yeah.
Is the script I linked in chat? I think that's the one Compute Canada uses, the set RPaths script.
Yeah, that looks like the one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they have two. They have one that they do to do the kind of wraps LD, and then the other one that set RPaths is kind of like for binary installs. That's the one I've used before, right? So that does the readout thing to shorten the RPath and set the RPath as well. It has a couple of different functions inside. But, yeah. So for example, that's used in all their binary installs. That's used to set the RPaths in that case. So
we have a similar thing like this for these binary installs that we have to use for Java, for example, where you just get Java as a binary build and you have to inject some crap into it as well to make sure it's picking up stuff from the compat layer, not from the host. Okay, yeah. So this is a very, very nice experiment, Frank. It gives us a lot of insight on how things should work or will work if we manage to clean things up on our end. And in the end, we probably also want some documentation on this. So something like LAMPS, I think, is a good example because it builds really quickly and it's easy to find good examples that you can run quickly as well. So by means of a demo for the documentation, I think it's a very good example.
I agree. Yeah, I'll put a bit more effort in it by the end of the day.
Yeah, well, and I guess we should get to the point where we add this to the easy documentation, this whole procedure, if you want to build stuff manually, once we have these RPath wrappers properly in place, because as long as they're not there, it's a bit too messy, I would say.
Yeah, fiddly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on this task?
No. Nothing.
Yeah, I think we can move on, Thomas. So the workflow task, as Jörg already mentioned, so this is just to have some context here. This is on the GitHub app that we want to develop, or that we started developing during the last hackathon, that looks at pull requests to the software layer repository on GitHub, and then starts building stuff into the EESSI environment to checking if that works, and maybe run some tests for those installations it obtained, checking if those work, and try to automate that whole procedure of building, testing, and deploying into EESSI as much as possible. So we have a starting point of that in the repository. That was mostly done by Jörg and Bob during the last hackathon. We had plans to proceed working on that this week. That didn't really work out. We did one small thing, and that, which is an important step, is to fully autonomously build and install software in the EESSI software layer. So up until now, that was sort of done manually. So we were starting our build container, then running the start prefix script to dump you into the compat layer, and then running another script to build the software. And now that whole procedure is automated. You can run a single script and specify another script that should be run in this whole correct build environment. So that's also what the bot will need to automatically build software in the correct environment. So that's a step in the right direction. It's a small step, but at least we made some progress. Yeah, and the next slide shows basically the to-do list, more or less, of what still needs to be done. Something we were hoping to get to this week but didn't work out is for the existing code that we have for the GitHub app, which can already listen to events coming from a GitHub repository and react to that. We also added, let's say, a replay event mode where you can feed it event data and then see how it reacts to that. We want to leverage that to implement proper CI testing for this app with the code we already have before it starts growing and it does more and more stuff. So whenever we make any changes to the code, that it can run some tests in GitHub Actions and then let us know whether we broke the app or not. So that's, I think, an important first step to take. And then, of course, continue the development of the app itself, make sure that it does what we have in mind with it, that it can build software, test software, also report back into the pull request and so on. So I think we have a pretty clear plan there on what to do and how to do it, but yeah, we need to find the time to actually go and implement that stuff. So yeah, if anyone is interested working on that, I think we can probably break it down into pretty small tasks that should happen, and maybe we should start opening issues for those into this repository to have like a step plan, and then whenever someone is up for tackling one of those small things, they can start contributing. We also have a talk scheduled during the EESSI Build user meeting next week on this topic, basically. And the hope was to actually have something working by then. It's pretty clear now that that's not going to happen. And since Bob fell ill this week, I'm not sure what's going to happen to that talk. We may have to cancel it, or we'll just outline the general idea of what we want to do with the bot and then point to the repository and say, look, if anyone's up for helping out with this, that would be welcome, because this kind of GitHub app bot would be useful for other people as well who are not using EESSI but are using EESSI Build to manage their software stack. It will be useful for them as well. So maybe it can grow into a more general thing in the end.
Yeah, so that okay, Jörg, go ahead.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, from December's hackathon, we had basically a very good example working. Not exactly to get it into EESSI, because the container was not the easy one. It was one I generated, but I thought the interaction between the bot and building, I thought that was already working, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there is an initial first version of the bot that at least does something useful already, but it's not using the EESSI Build container, but that's a detail, I think.
Yeah.
What, as far as I know, it's not reporting back into the pull request yet.
It is
certainly.
It is printing out the log files. So there's a log directory. So
Yeah.
it is feeding some information back, but I'm not quite sure if the bot actually now is picking up on that. That is the bit I don't know. I have to check.
Is it reporting that back into the pull request or just printing it as an output of the job it submits?
It is an output of the job it submits. So that Slurm log file that goes into a log directory.
Yeah. Okay.
And the idea was then to basically look into how the bot is digesting that in, but it also does some testing on a different container.
Yeah,
I think I scripted that already.
Yeah, there's certainly parts. I mean, we're heading in the right direction. That's sure, but it's let's say far from being useful enough to actually be used to add software into EESSI. Well, we're getting there. Yeah, and I think the general idea is clear.
Yeah.
So maybe Jörg, you and I can sync up if Bob will be unavailable for a while to see if we want to do a talk on this during the user meeting next week. It's planned for Friday, so we still have a bit of time to work on some slides on this. Because the bot is public. What's there is already useful maybe to some people. Well, let's see. Let's discuss this outside of the meeting here. And we can see what we do, because showing this or presenting what we have or the general idea at the user meeting next week could raise some interest from others as well. So that's why I want to avoid canceling the talk.
That is the reason I've made the comment, because I also want to avoid canceling the talk, because I think it is quite interesting and important.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Does anyone use something like that for the non-EESSI software stack you built with EasyBuild?
Yes.
Yeah, I know Bob is using this internally as well. He started working exactly on an app like this in Groningen. Mm-hmm. I know CSCS has a setup where they use Jenkins, where they basically open a pull request and then Jenkins, that triggers Jenkins to do builds and then feedback stuff into the pull request, and they have a cycle like this. So it can certainly work. The reason we want to do it in as a GitHub app in Python is, I think, because we know Python a bit better, and it's going to be maybe a lot easier to adapt for others as long as they're using GitHub to manage their software stack, and I think many people are. So.
Yeah, I know that just recently, maybe as of today, at Lumi and Lust, they have started discussing this, how to do this.
I'm also using what I call the backend, the actual installation on our new cluster, and I'm installing the software basically by that. I actually have a GitHub page for that if you want to have a look, which is very similar what everybody else does, because there are only so many ways of doing something a bit more sensible.
And I think also in Norway, they have started looking into such thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe we need to pool those resources or those efforts together into something more central. It's if everyone starts implementing. I mean, in some sense, it's similar to EasyBuild 10 years ago. If everyone starts hacking on their own build scripts, yeah, then everybody has lots of work to do. While if you collaborate, you can maybe build something better. Yeah, not sure, but yeah, doing a talk about this at the EasyBuild user meeting will make it clear if there's interest from others to work together on something like this or not. Okay, next task, I guess, GPU support. That Alan was overseeing that.
Yeah, so not too many updates from Wednesday, I'd say. Yeah, I think everybody was kind of short on time this week. Me, anyway, in particular, I was. The environment worked okay. I switched over the GPU resource on Phoenix to use 2021-12. So that was all working fine. And then we have more or less a working setup. We had a working setup from December. So I tweaked that to work with 2021-12, a couple of small changes in the script for that. And the GPU support again is working there, and part of the script is to verify that. I built GrowMax with GPU support, and that seems to work. I said in the next slide that I'd give a demo, but I don't know if it's really necessary. It'll just be showing you that it does actually pick up the GPUs. So we still have more or less the issues that we started out with. They're kind of still there. So we've updated the script, but it still needs a lot of tests. Michael started implementing some of those already today and yesterday. So some of those have already begun. We still need stuff in the compat layer. So we need something to unpack RPMs in the compat layer. That still needs to be done. Can you put on the next slide, and maybe I'll. So yeah, then the other things would be the hook. We need a hook from EasyBuild to inject the LMOD property, and then we need a hook in LMOD to do something with that property, right? So it's basically hide modules if that property exists, unless some conditions are met. Probably you want, because we expect CUDA to be in the host injections path, we can check for the existence. We could potentially check for the existence of something that we expect to find in a CUDA installation. So something like a bin directory, and that could be the thing that we use to hide the modules. Another option would be that we should probably allow people to override that in general. And so we are also considering that you could use NVIDIA SMI, the presence of that. But if you're building something on a login node, NVIDIA SMI either might not exist or might not work because there's no actual GPU there. So that's something we have to consider as well. And then this would also need to work with different EC versions as well. So LMOD would have to respect the version. And so in some cases, for example, it might work with some version of EC and not with another. So that would have to be taken into account as well. And then the other thing, well, this idea that should we have a symlink in CVMFS? So kind of once you have CUDA in place, it looks the same as all the other software. So that you basically swap out you symlink into the host injections path, so the same directory location, more or less, as a normal installation would be. That would be kind of a seamless way of injecting CUDA into the stack. And then there would need to be probably a switch in that module to say to not load that module if for example, the bin directory didn't exist. So then you would know that the script that's required hasn't actually been run. That's more or less where we are. So we've made some development, I would say. One concern I didn't put down here, but I've been thinking about this week is I'm not sure how well the OpenMPI plus CUDA stuff is working. So we have a couple of discussions going on in EasyBuild right now in general about that, about how well UCX plus CUDA is really working with the plugin thing. So it'd be interesting to see that. I tried to test it out. So I did install this OSU benchmarks with the CUDA support, but I don't have any experience with that. So it's seg-faulted for me, and I didn't know if that was because of something I did, or it's maybe something with the plugin thing that we have that maybe it's not working, because there was a similar issue reported upstream in EasyBuild. And the other issue would be there is that plugin thing potentially takes care of UCX plus CUDA. But what do we do in the case of libfabric? So libfabric is needed for other interconnects, and there we don't have any plugin in place. So right now the way things stand is that you can't have the CUDA support if you're using those libfabric. If you're using libfabric right now.
For the seg faults, Alan, I think I remember hitting very weird seg faults early on in the Easy project when we were mixing stuff from the host and stuff from the compat layer. So maybe it's something like this going on, but if other people are seeing this outside of Easy as well, it could well be something else. So I think it was Kaspar reporting this as well, and it could be in Easy, but I think he had this natively on the
it might be this. I mean, I thought that maybe it was the case because you're trying to use something that's kind of RDMA without RDMA support, and then it's not an InfiniBand card, right? So it's just Ethernet that's on those things. So I thought maybe it's that combination doesn't work. I don't know. So I kind of ignored it, but then when I saw Casper come up with it, I thought, oh, maybe there's more to it.
Okay. And then what would be the end result of this whole GPU effort? So one thing is going to be the script that people will have to run to install these CUDA compot libraries to make sure they can leverage GPU-aware software installations in EESSI together with their host GPU drivers and things like this. And then I guess also some documentation around this setup and why it has to be like this pretty much. So why you have to run this script and what it does exactly. Are there any other aspects to it, or well, I mean, is it mostly that?
I mean, if we were allowed to distribute CUDA, that would be it, right? So you just put something inside the module and expecting to find the compatibility libraries, right? And if they're not there, you tell people what to do. And so that would be it. But the way things stand right now, that script also has to do the CUDA installation. And that's going to require space. So, I mean, we can build that into the script to do whatever necessary checks, right? To make sure that the space exists to do these things. But that's basically, yeah. So that will be it. Yeah, you'd have to run the script. I mean, we'd have to support it, and I don't see us getting this okay from NVIDIA in the near future, right? They're not really engaging on that front. So I think we'll have to go this path for the foreseeable.
Well, maybe it's a good idea to keep this install CUDA script separate and just have let's say the main script check where the CUDA is there. If it's not there, it tells you please run the install CUDA script, which you can find here. Because if we ever get to the point where we can ship CUDA, then that script will be useless, and we don't have to pull it out again of the other script. So keeping it separate may be a good idea. In the long term. And also if we get to a point where we have this script for the compat libraries and that does all the checks, we have the install CUDA script and we have some documentation that explains the whole setup. Once we get to that point, that would be the time where we step to NVIDIA again and say, look what you're making us do, and please help us to simplify this. Yeah. So once everything is properly documented and working, that's I think when we have a good story towards NVIDIA to try and help us out. Yeah. Okay. Cool. But yeah, so it's still a bit messy right now, and there's a bit more work to do, but it's basically working. That's,
it's not that messy, but I mean, we don't have the links in place. We don't have the stuff inside the compatibility layer and inside CVMFS to make it easy, right? It could be down to a simple script if those things were in place, but it's not. I can't rely on the things to unpack the RPMs to be there. There's still some work to do, because also you have to do the OS detection. There's some things in the script now that Mikhail did today, but actually I was thinking we could already take that from EasyBuild, right? And because EasyBuild has this fallbacks and everything for OS detection, so maybe that's a better place to pull that out.
It's not that intelligent. It just tries stuff. It tries RPM. If it doesn't find RPM, it tries with something else. So it's not like it's very intelligent, or that could be improved there as well. If we're going to need it anyway, we might as well do it there and just leverage that.
Yeah, I think it might be the better move. I think it's already doing more stuff than we'd have to script all that, right? These kind, because if we're effectively going to do the same thing, we're going to look at etc. OS and everything, you know.
Yeah. Then it's better to do it there and just use EasyBuild as a library and let it do the hard work. Yeah.
How about testing this on a couple of other systems?
Yeah, that would be good. So yeah, I mean, right now you could take that script and it should anywhere it's like Red Hat based, so Santos or Rocky, it should work with what's there. On a Debian system, you'd have to tweak the script, because right now I've only just done the RPM unpacking. You'd have to do Debian unpacking instead and pull down the right library. But it's a small tweak. It's a relatively small tweak of the script, I would say.
I'm planning to have a look at this next week, Alan, and we'll give you feedback on how far it gets.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, these two hackathons combined, it's now pretty clear how we can get the GPU support working, so that's very good. So a bit more work needed to clean it up a bit and properly document it. But yeah, at least proof of concept wise, it's working. That's very good. Okay. Anything else on this, or shall we move on?
Well, I mean, maybe the only thing to say is that next week I plan on harassing the AMD guys a little bit to see if they do something similar to the compat libraries that CUDA have, or how they. So in that scenario, would we require driver updates? So if we update something on the RockM side, do we require driver updates from anybody who's using EESSI? That's a lot more complicated, because then you need the rights, right? And so we're kind of assuming that not everybody who uses EESSI will have these kind of rights, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that it may be difficult to explain your full question to them during the Q&A. I'm not sure, but one of the AMD guys joined the EESSI Build Slack as well, so maybe you can try and reach out to him there and explain things.
What's his name? Yeah, or what's his handle?
Michael Clem. So it's just one of the authors, one of the speakers of the talk.
Yeah, I might prime him a little bit, maybe. Then, so yeah, maybe I'll do it like that.
Mm-hmm. Or yeah, if he's up for it, the idea is to have a breakout room after his talk as well. If he's up for sticking around a bit longer, you could try and explain things there to him. If Q&A doesn't allow sufficient time for it. Okay. Then yes, next task, Thomas. So this was mostly yours, but it's clear that you didn't have any time, I guess, for this at all.
Unfortunately not.
Yeah, Kaspar was also the driving force for this during the last hackathon, who couldn't join this hackathon this week. So that's just unfortunate. That's what it is. There's little else to do. The next one, monitoring. Terje was here or is here or maybe isn't visible here in the meeting, but I don't think he made a lot of progress.
No, I didn't. I got a few things done. The main issue is that I found some problems with the CVMFS exporter, that it doesn't actually work, as we know, on for Stratum 1s. So we need to figure out a new way to monitor Stratum 1s. So I got a few things like that prepared, but I didn't actually get anything done. I've had one of those weeks, unfortunately, like everybody else. But there's a good plan on actually getting useful stuff done next week, because this week clearly wasn't useful.
At least we won't get bored during the next hackathon. That's a good outcome. Okay. Yeah, let's move on, I guess, to the next one. Yuri, this is your sort of lone wolf.
Yes,
task.
So I continued from where I ended in December. Based on the recommendations last time, this time used Node local storage, and that was many times faster, so that I could iterate much faster. That was a good suggestion. And I learned that there are actually very wildly different performance file systems on the cloud, so something I have to look more into in the future. So I also learned that Singularity fake root, as nice as it sounds, still requires some setup from admin or root privileged user. It's not directly usable for non-privileged users. So Kenneth, you had to rebuild images to get that setting in effect. After that, it worked nice. So next thing I learned about Singularity is that it's failing hard on files it cannot copy into the container that you want it to copy. So it's not just consuming broken symlinks or unreadable files. And there is currently no way around that. So I still had to do this tar untar that I began with in December. So I have to tar all of the content that I want to pack into a container, and then copy this tar into the container and untar it in the container as a post step, which is a bit ineffective from the viewpoint of disk space consumption, but they say disk space is cheap, so whatever. Then I worked on getting the environment initialized in the container in a, let's say, future-proof way. This means that I wanted to use the same environment initialization procedure as for the rest of EESSI, and learned that this is also not straightforward, because bash scripts that are running in the container initialization step are not running interactively. Therefore, they don't set some of the variables that EESSI init script depends on. After some time wasted on this, I just gave up and configure things in a way so that when you run a container, it prints a couple of commands that you have to still enter and run as a user to initialize environment and maybe load some modules and stuff like that. So it's a simple additional copy-paste operation that user of the resulting container needs to do. And then I had everything kind of functioning, running. I added some, let's say, user interface, command line flags, a bit of a documentation. And this is the current state of this work. It's kind of functional together with this pilot installation of EESSI. I expect there to be changes in the future. So this script will also need adapting in the future as well. There are also some clear directions for improvements that I will look into. For example, integration of the test suites for specific modules once they're available. And something that my users came up with is assigning these persistent identifiers to the resulting containers, so they could be quoted in published papers and stuff like that. So this is for the future.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jörg.
Maybe I got the wrong end of the stick. When you say container, is that a ZIF file, singularity image format, or is that actually a sandbox? Because I would have thought that if you are creating a sandbox, which just contains, for example, the operating system, whatever it's required, and then you are using the bind facility from Singularity to basically bind the EESSI layer you want to have inside the container, and then you are using the container Singularity build directive and build a Singularity image file, ZIF file. Whatever you have mounted inside the container, does it actually turn up in the container as a real file, or does it simply contain an empty directory? I haven't tried it. It's a crazy idea. I'm not quite sure if you understand my rattling on.
Yeah, I see what you want to do, and I'm not doing that. So I'm not doing any bind mounting, anything like that. I just copy stuff from EESSI 3 and dump it into the container under the same path.
Because
I would also expect, Jörg, that it won't work. It won't actually copy anything from the mount into the ZIF file that you obtain. I'm not sure, but that's what I would expect.
Yes, me too.
I'm not sure as well, and I agree, I wouldn't expect it, but I'm very much inclined to try it out.
You could give it a try and see if that's that I guess would save some of the pain maybe with the tarring, untarring. if it's willing to copy broken symlinks in that case, I'm not sure. So yeah, some of them are, some of those broken symlinks have a good reason in EESSI. So if you can't convince Singularity to just copy those, which I think is a bit silly that they wouldn't allow that. Yeah, the tarring on tarring may be a necessary evil, I guess.
Because if we can avoid the tarring and untarring and moving stuff around too often, the whole build process is much quicker.
Yeah, it should be a lot faster.
Yeah, I mean, I opened an issue on that, and I guess we can discuss there further what we can do about those. I mean, it's not just broken symlinks, it's also files that are unreadable by an unprivileged user. So my idea is maybe we can add this as some kind of check in some compat layer building test or something, and get rid of those before they are even pushed into CVMFS.
Yeah, we already have some checks for the compat layers. They can definitely be added there. Or we could catch it as a part of the script that we use to bootstrap the compat layers and things like this. That would make sense. At least to weed out the ones that we don't want to have there. Yeah. And yeah, another question I have is, well, first on the easy init scripts. So you worked around that for now by just printing those commands, and that's a good workaround, I think, for now, at least to get you something functional. But we should probably make sure that those init scripts can also work in a non-interactive setup. So that's definitely not deliberate. And I think that's something we want to fix. So maybe that's something to open an issue for in the software layer. Like how to test it, or what kind of problems you're seeing now when sourcing those init scripts in a non-interactive container. I think that's important enough to fix.
I found an issue relating to the init scripts, and I just added a comment there. So just to keep track of that.
Okay, yeah, right. Yes, I saw that pass by. Yeah, so I think in the long run, that's certainly something we want to fix, and something that we maybe also can test for in the CI that we have for the init scripts to make sure we don't break it again. So that sounds all doable to me. And then also for the script that you have now, so it's now sitting in the Hackathon repository. So if people want to play around with it, they can. But maybe the next step could be to get this added to the file system layer repository. I guess that's where it belongs in EESSI, since you're exporting the whole file system, let's say, into a tarball or a container. So I guess that would be the correct place for it. And there we can also write some minimal CI for the script, that it does a very small export of a single module or something into a container image. It's something that can be done in minutes. And that way we also—
a good candidate for that, yeah.
Java or even GCC, like a GCC core installation. That's not small, but it's probably small enough that it even in a CI environment, it could do it in minutes. So that's maybe a good test for the script. So yeah, that seems like could be a good next step if you want to make this actually part of EESSI itself, because I'm sure that it will be interesting for others as well. Like Christian, for example, who really likes containers for some reason. If he can export EESSI into a container, he would be very happy.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a really strong selling point once we start advertising EESSI around Europe and wider, because with all this open science push now that's happening, this will be, I'm sure it will become a requirement for papers to publish their data and publish their software stacks.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I can see that as well. I'm very much pushing people to use, if they are using containers, to say, okay, publish your container build script with your publication, because it is reproducible.
Yeah, and this would be not really the build script, but yeah, if you can easily export a certain part of EESSI into a container to use it in different environments or for archiving purposes, yeah, that's certainly a selling point. I agree.
Or you simply say, I was using that version of EESSI, and if you want to have it, there's the container, just have a look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. Yeah, very good, Yuri. So this was mostly, well, let's say only your effort, but yeah, you made a very good progress on this. That's very good. And then, yeah, very soon you'll have to redo it again with Aptainer rather than Singularity. They're going to be close enough to each other. It should be easy to do. Okay. And we have one more slide that I think Hugo added.
Yeah, correct. Just to keep you up to date with the progress here. I've been working on CITC a little bit to make sure Azure supports is in there to be able to use EESSI in a cluster environment in an easy way. So basically, the PRs are out for both the Terraform and the Ansible side of CITC. I'm verifying now with the InfiniBands on our Skylake Zen2 and actually also on the Zen3 nodes. These all seem to work. The only thing I have to verify is whether or not the Zen3 is actually using Zen2 or Zen3 itself. So that's a final check I have to do. InfiniBand has been implemented in sort of like a trivial way, in the sense that whenever I'm spinning up nodes, I'm checking whether they have InfiniBand, and if so, I'm creating an availability zone for that node shape and adding each of the nodes to that availability zone. That is the technical requirement for us to make sure that the node lands in the same physical cluster and therefore is InfiniBand connected. Otherwise, there's always the risk of having a node spinning up in another cluster, and then you have two nodes with an InfiniBand address, but they're on different physical connections there. The downside is, in my current trivial implementation, this means that the autoscaling is happening in a serial fashion. So getting 60 nodes up one by one is taking a little while. That being said, it does work. So I am seeing proper scaling for the Ward3 on all the different node shapes. So that appears to be working correctly. With that, I'm also working on integrating EESSI in our AC Hub, which is something we use more for the production environments with our customers, and make sure we're adding it there as well, as sort of like showcasing what can be done.
Cool. Yep, very nice. Did you get some help from Matt on looking at your pull requests and working towards getting those in, or
not at the moment? He may have been sort of like offering me help at this moment, but I may have missed that. That being said, we are also creating and working on helping him getting proper access to Azure. So sort of like trying different paths here.
Okay.
I'm not too concerned on sort of like that at this moment.
Yeah, eventually. I mean, he would be very happy, I think, if CITC supports Azure. So I'm sure he'll get around to that.
Yeah.
Oh, and for the Zen3, so do you mean you're checking whether EESSI works, the EESSI detection for Zen3 works, or?
Yeah, and that was regarding one of the things I saw passing by on an issue that one of the CPU capabilities was not properly forwarded.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that actually is now, if I run it on a Milan, is it now actually being detected as a Zen2, or is it really being detected as a Zen3?
Yeah, that was indeed one of the issues I ran into with Archspec, that it was actually recognizing it as a Zen2, because I think the PKU CPU feature, God knows what that is, was not being exported, and apparently there's a good reason why Archspec really wants that. There was actually I think it was a pull request by AMD to make sure that was actually there, because it's important in some cases. So
okay, I already reached out internally to verify if and why that is not being exported. So
Okay.
I'm already also tracking it internally to see what can be done about that.
All right. Yeah, that's very good. Cool. Yeah, nice. And yeah, you have a talk on some of this stuff, like your experiments with Wharf 3, also next week at the Easy Build user meeting, right?
Correct. So basically, I'm giving away the whole presentation here, but that's fine. At least I have the good news is I have the data now to present next week.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. Cool. All right. Yeah. So all in all, even though we didn't really work on all the things we hoped or expected to work on, we're still getting some quite good outcomes of the hackathon in general. So yeah, the format sort of works where we try to convince people to carve out some of their time for this, and to make it clear that whenever they need help, people will be there through the easy Slack. So that seems to be working well. That's very good. Okay, yeah. Let's maybe a topic for the next easy update meeting. So first Thursday of February, we can maybe quickly discuss if and when we want to do another hackathon. It's certainly not going to be in February. I think that would be too close. But yeah, let's see if we want to do this again and in what shape or form going forward. It seems like it's worth the effort, and things are moving left and right. We're also getting more people actively involved in EESSI, which is also one of the goals of the hackathon. So I think that's also a good side effect of this whole effort. Okay, does anyone else have something to add before we wrap up? Going once, going twice. If not, we can wrap up here. Thanks a lot, everyone, for being involved. And yeah, let's see where this goes going forward.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.